Dr. Sarah Okonkwo found a small alien child crying alone in the ruins of a bombed settlement on Colony World Threshold 7. She didn't hesitate kneeling beside him, offering water, humming an old lullaby her grandmother taught her. The child's species was unfamiliar, his distress universal. She didn't know his father commanded the most feared armada in known space. Sarah was a human xenobiologist and relief worker, operating in the contested frontier zones where the Terran Coalition and the HFY sovereignty waged a grinding territorial war. She ran a makeshift medical shelter in the neutral zones, treating casualties from both sides, a personal mission driven by the memory of her younger sister who died in a civilian transport caught in crossfire 3 years ago. Threshold 7 was a border world nominally under ceasefire but regularly violated by both factions, littered with abandoned settlements and refugees. The HFY were an insectoid warrior species, six-limbed, chitinous, with complex hierarchical military culture that valued strength and viewed compassion as tactical weakness. Sarah had treated HFY wounded before but never seen one of their young. The child she found was no larger than a human toddler, with translucent carapace plates and luminescent markings that pulsed with distress. He was separated from his family, terrified and injured, a deep crack across his thorax leaking ichor. Sarah's medical instincts override political boundaries. She stabilized him, cleaned the wound, and stayed with him as darkness fell. As Sarah tended to the child through the night, she noticed his markings weren't ordinary. They formed patterns she'd seen only in HFY military insignia documentation, specifically the complex geometries associated with high command families. She dismissed it as coincidence until a HFY search patrol arrived at dawn. Not regular military, but elite warriors in obsidian armor bearing the symbol of the Black Fleet, the sovereignty's most feared armada responsible for 3 major human colony devastations. The patrol leader, a towering warrior named Skethrol, saw Sarah with the child and immediately raised weapons. Sarah placed herself between the soldiers and the injured child, hands raised non-threateningly. Skethrol demanded in broken human standard, "Step away from the aircast." Sarah refused, explaining the child needed continued medical monitoring. The warrior's posture shifted to aggression in HFY culture. Touching an aircast individual without permission was a profound violation, potentially punishable by execution. Skethrol contacted his command ship, and within the hour, a massive HFY dreadnought entered orbit. Sarah understood she triggered something far beyond a simple recovery operation. The child whom she'd been calling Little One was someone of immense importance. Skethrol informed her that Fleet-Commander Vek'tharon himself was descending to retrieve his son. Sarah's blood went cold. Vek'tharon, the architect of the Ceres Station massacre, the strategist behind the Kepler 9 orbital bombardment, a name spoken with dread across human space. She'd been comforting the child of humanity's most feared enemy. Her first instinct was survival-driven fear. But looking at the small creature still clinging to her hand, she remembered her sister remembered that all wars are fought by people who have families, children, loved ones worth protecting. Fleet-Commander Vek'tharon arrived not with diplomats, but with an honor guard bristling with weapons. He was massive even by HFY standards, his carapace decorated with kill markings that told a story of decades of warfare. His compound eyes fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made her hindbrain scream predator. He approached his son, who immediately reached for him but then looked back at Sarah. The child was torn between biological parent and the stranger who comforted him through trauma. Vek'tharon examined his son's treated wound with expert precision, then turned to Sarah. His voice was deep, resonant, translated through a vocoder. "You touched aircast. You understand penalty?" Sarah's voice was steadier than she felt. "I understood a child was hurt and alone. That's all I needed to understand." The honor guard tensed, weapons tracking micro-movements. Vek'tharon studied her with alien calculation. You are human. I have killed thousands of your species. You know who I am? Sarah met his eyes, a gesture that took every ounce of courage, because Kethver warriors interpreted direct eye contact as challenge. I know. You destroyed Ceres Station. My sister was there. She was 12. Silence. The kind that precedes violence. Then Sarah did something that made no logical sense but was purely human. She looked at Vek'tharon's son and then back at the commander. But he's just a child. And children shouldn't suffer for their father's wars. Vek'tharon's mandibles moved in a way Sarah's xenobiology training suggested was profound agitation. He gestured to his son, who reluctantly released Sarah's hand. Then Vek'tharon did something unprecedented. He performed a gesture Sarah recognized from her research, a complex movement of his primary limbs that in Kethver culture acknowledged a life debt. You saved Aircast when you could have weaponized his vulnerability. When you knew who I am. His translated voice carried something that might be respect. This creates ... complication. Vek'tharon made an immediate declaration that shocked both his honor guard and Sarah. She was granted shield protection under his personal authority at Kethver, custom that placed an individual under the absolute protection of a fleet commander's honor. Any harm to Sarah would be considered direct attack on Vek'tharon himself. His son insisted on saying goodbye, approaching Sarah and touching her hand with his small manipulator limbs in what she recognized as a Kethver gesture of trust. As the Kethver forces prepared to depart, Vek'tharon left something with Sarah, communication crystal encoded with a direct channel to his command ship. Frontier zones are dangerous. You continue this work? Sarah nodded. Always. Someone has to help the ones caught in between. Vek'tharon's mandibles clicked in what might be amusement or acknowledgement. You have shield protection, human Sarah Okonkwo. It extends to your medical shelter and those you protect. Any Kethver forces that violate this will answer to me. He paused. You asked your sister's name? Sarah whispered, Maya. Vek'tharon tilted his massive head. In Kethver memory keeping, we mark debts and losses. Your sister Maya Okonkwo died at Ceres Station. I commanded that operation. I cannot undo this. He placed one clawed hand over his thorax in what Sarah's research identified as an expression of profound acknowledgement. But I can ensure her name is remembered, and that her sister's compassion prevented another child from dying alone in darkness. The Kethver forces departed. Sarah stood in the ruins of the settlement, processing what just occurred. Within days, something changed in the frontier zones. Kethver forces began avoiding Sarah's medical shelter and the surrounding area with deliberate precision. Word spread through both human and Kethver channels, the Black Fleet. Commander's son was saved by a human doctor who showed mercy when she had every reason to seek revenge. Months later, Sarah's medical shelter operated without harassment from either side. An unprecedented sanctuary that both factions unofficially respected because violating it meant crossing. Fleet-Commander Vek'tharon. Sarah never used the communication crystal, but its presence was protection enough. The story spread through frontier zones, whispered in refugee camps and forward operating bases. A human woman who comforted an enemy's child and earned the protection of the galaxy's most feared military commander. Sarah didn't save Vek'tharon's son for strategic advantage or political capital. She did it because a child was hurt and frightened. And helping him was the right thing regardless of whose child he was. In doing so, she demonstrated something the Kethver rarely encountered in warfare: compassion that transcends faction. Mercy that exists independent of tactical advantage. The war continued, brutal and unforgiving. But in the spaces between battles, In the frontier zones where Sarah worked, something had shifted. Kethfer warriors who encountered her shelter saw it not as enemy installation but as the place where one of their air caste was protected by someone who had every reason to harm him. They remembered, and in their warrior culture built on honor and debt, memory had weight. Sarah continued her work, treating the wounded regardless of which side they fought for, guided by her sister's memory and the knowledge that sometimes the most radical act in wartime is simple human kindness. Humanity's greatest strength isn't superior weapons, it's seeing the individual even in the enemy.